children. How are you? Sorry, I guess we should be up. So we are picking up immediately where we left off from yesterday. Yesterday we did the Golden Age, but at the very end of the Golden Age, we had the payoff on our seemingly useless bit of information that comes into play later. Does anybody happen to remember what that was? Harry. Sparta wasn't in the Delian League, and what did we end with yesterday? What did we say happened? What was going on? War between Sparta and Athens. So that is going to be where we start today. And then we are going into Greek philosophy. So you are getting a very brief crash course on Greek philosophy. Just so you know, this is the type of thing that you could take an entire college class on. We're going to spend about 14 minutes on it. Okay, so you're getting just a very quick glimpse of it, just to get some idea. So, the first question I want you to talk about with your partner is, we have talked about philosophies before. We talked about one particular place that had some philosophies. Where was that? That focused on philosophy rather than religion. China. See if you can remember with your partner, why did the philosophies emerge in China when they did? See what you can remember. Go back. So where did they emerge from? What era in China's history? Period of Warring States. Very good. Okay, it was a time of chaos, a time of disorder, and people were looking for order. People were looking for answers. I think you'll see a similar pattern emerge here. So, we're going to start with the Peloponnesian War. Hold on, let's make sure we get our words straight here. What was the war that helped usher in Greece's Golden Age? The Persian Wars. Okay, because who are they fighting? Persia. Okay, this is the Peloponnesian War, which named for this little part of the peninsula. Okay, this is the Peloponnesian Peninsula, which is really hard to say. So the Peloponnesian War is Athens and its allies versus Sparta and its allies. It's being recorded for all time. So the Peloponnesian War, that's what I have as the arrow, Athens and Sparta, Athens versus Sparta and their allies. So you can see the war lasted over 20 years. So it was an on and off war for a generation. It didn't go straight through. They weren't fighting the entire time. But it's an on and off war for an entire generation. Now at the same time the war is going on, there's a huge plague that rips through Greece and really hurts especially Athens. So it was an unknown disease that killed many and also hurt the war effort of both sides. Unknown disease that killed men. They just refer to it as a plague. Unknown disease that killed many and hurt the war efforts of both. We think it might have been, based on the symptoms that people wrote down and let us know, it might have been smallpox. It might have been typhus, but we don't really know. We just know it was some sort of plague that killed a whole bunch of people. So in the midst of all this war and chaos, there's a plague. In the midst of war and chaos and the plague, Athens' democracy dies. A tyrant takes over Athens, and its democracy is killed. Shall we define tyrant?
Yeah. What does tyrant mean?
Thanks. Good question. For our use, we're just going to think of him as a dictator. Tyrant is a dictator. Athens surrenders in 404 BC and is totally defeated. Athens surrenders in 404 BC. So make sure you know who surrenders, who lost here. Now, again, what did we say the Greek win in the Persian Wars did? What did that do for them? Opened up other stuff, brought in peace, brought in the Golden Age, all kinds of opportunities, right? The loss in the Peloponnesian Wars is going to be devastating to them. So first of all, especially for Athens, there's a loss of population, of trade. The Athenians' faith in democracy goes down. People question its effectiveness. They're like, we just lost. How good of a system can this actually be? So the faith in democracy goes down. People question its effectiveness. And Greece in general begins to question itself. They want to find answers. They want to find the truth. So similar to China and the Warring States, when they were looking for ways to bring about order, our Greek philosophers are going to be looking for ways to find the truth. So, Greek philosophy, and this is the foundation for a lot of Western thought, a lot of the way we approach problems. The word philosopher actually means lover of wisdom, and their goal is to find the truth. Now, our Greek philosophers differ in a lot of ways, and if we were doing even more on this, you'd see there's even more differences. We were just scratching the surface with the big three. But there's two underlying assumptions that we can say for all Greek philosophy. The first one is that the universe is put together in an orderly way with absolute and unchanging laws. The universe is put together in an orderly way with absolute and unchanging laws. All the Greek philosophers would agree with that. The universe is put together in an orderly way with absolute and unchanging laws. And people can understand those laws through logic and reason. So now you're going to have a conversation here about that, about those two assumptions. So first of all, do you understand what they're saying? Kind of go through them, make sure you know what they're getting at. And then, do you agree with it? Do you agree with those two assumptions? Okay, so first, do you understand it? Second, do you agree with them? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Correct.
I agree with number two.
Yes. All right. Do you agree with it? That the universe is put together in an orderly way with unchanging laws, and that we can understand everything through logic and reason? How many say yeah? You have to vote. How many say yes? We agree with it. You agree with those two assumptions? You have to agree with both of them. Both or neither. The rest of you do not agree with them? Alright, so the majority do not agree with them. Then how do you explain what we see? How do you explain the world around us? That's always going to fall at 9.8 meters per second per second. Good point. Good point. Don't think of the law as in like the speed limit or like shoplifting. Think of gravity. Think of light. Think of human nature would be some of the things they're talking about. So when you're thinking about these laws, don't think about laws as in like legal standings. This is universal rules, maybe, instead of law, maybe would be a better word to use it. Good clarification, thank you. Those of you that do agree with it, that everything can be understood through logic and reason, how do you logic and reason love?
It happens every in everyone's lifetime.
Not necessarily. We like to think so. But even if it did, let's make the assumption that it does. How do you logic and reason love? Is there logic to it?
It's not really logical, like you just like reproduce.
Reproduce is not the same as love. Right? You can talk to your health teacher about that at some point. You'll do more of this when you take a philosophy class in college. Let's talk about the big three. Okay? The first one is Socrates. Okay, everybody's favorite from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So everybody replicate it. It's not Socrates. Okay? Socrates. It's Socrates. Replicate even plays Socrates. So he's the first one. He's the first of the big three we're going to talk about. He believed that you could find truth through questioning. Truth through questioning. We'll explain what that means a little bit more here in a second. He challenged civil and religious authorities. When I say civil, that means the government. He challenged civil and religious authorities. He thought they were corrupt, they were hypocrites, that they weren't helping find the truth. So he's calling them to task. He's calling them out. He's like, we need to find truth. You government officials aren't doing that. You religious officials aren't doing that. Now, the way he taught wasn't called this at the time, but we now call it the Socratic method. Okay? That is where you teach with questions. Write that down in the notes plate. That is where you teach with questions. So, Socrates didn't lecture. Socrates didn't pontificate. He forced his students to think. He forced his students to think for themselves. And he would do that by asking questions. It's really easy for some idiot to stand up here with a script and just say things to you. It's really hard. That'll be a good camera moment right there. It's really hard to force you to think for yourself. I had one instructor in all my years of education who was an effective Socratic methods teacher. It was my constitutional law class, senior year of college. It was the hardest class I've ever taken. There was 12 people in the room. One of them was the professor. 10 of them were going to law school the next year. And then there was me. I was like, hi, I want to be a teacher. And you'd have to read a constitutional law case. You'd read a whole Supreme Court case. You'd read the dissents. You'd read the whole thing. And we sat in the semicircle. And Professor Carmen, Ira Carmen, would just walk around. And if you were on that day, he'd just start asking you questions. Tell me about Bowers v. Hardwick, O'Neill. And I'd start explaining the case. You'd be like, but yes, how does this fit in with Justice Whizzer White's dissent in the Mall case? Then you have to remember another case from another class period and pull that up and combine those two. Then what do you think Justice Breyer would think about this? What do you mean what Justice Breyer would think about this? He wasn't even alive when this case was written. So now I have to think about what Justice Breyer's opinions have been in the past and how he would rule on this case that didn't even happen during his lifetime. And he would just pull these things out of you with his questioning. And by the end, you were usually on for about 15, 20 minutes at a time. At the end, one of two things happened. Either he finished and he'd walk by and be like, you're off the hook, O'Neill, you're done. You'd be like, oh my God, I didn't even know I knew all that stuff. That was incredible. And it was an awesome feeling. or you just start dying and like go into a tailspin and not know what he was saying. You'd be like, let's see if somebody else knows this. And it was super intense, but it was so incredible. And I've thought about it a lot since then. The practice and the line of questioning and the preparation that you had to have to be an effective Socratic methods teacher is just incredible. And it's well beyond my capacity as an instructor. So anyway, now, the end of Socrates. He angered the authorities. I mean, he was always picking at them. And they gave him a choice. Either he accepts the death penalty or admit he was wrong. Take back all his teachings. Which do you think he did? Took the poison. He had to drink poison, hemlock. Which is a lot like mistletoe, by the way. So you don't eat mistletoe. The plants are related to both poison. So below that are 3 quotes from Socrates. What I want you to do with each of them is talk through them, put them in your own words, and then just take a minute and discuss each one of them. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think about it? Hey, by the way, as a side note, there's an entire section on your test on philosophy, on what we're doing today. So just as a reminder, when we're having these conversations, these things might be helpful. Okay? So go through, put each one of them into your own words, and then discuss each one of them. Go ahead.
All right. Not know if you don't know the
Maybe just showing we don't
Not looked at. I didn't think about it.
wisdom is accepting that we don't know. Like their competency. Realize how
Oh, it's like a relatively place. It's like a really small portion.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about Plato. We're going to talk about one of Socrates' students. So Socrates didn't actually write most of his stuff down. He taught outside, and he just spoke with students and talked and asked questions. Most of what we know about Socrates actually comes from Plato. So for Plato believed that there was truth through order, that was how Greece is going to return to truth. I mean, like how each of them thought you could find the truth? I mean, like how each of them thought you could find truth? Because didn't we do that when we did China, the philosophies? How did each of these philosophies think you could find order? Seems like there's some good parallels there. Does that answer your question? So Plato believed you could find truth through order. He also founded the Academy, which is a very famous school, and it popularized Socratic thought. It popularized his teachings. The famous school that popularized Socratic thought. It also, and you don't need to write this part out, lasted 900 years, which is pretty impressive. I mean, don't get me wrong, Libertyville's 100 years old. That's pretty good, but 900 years. Plato's most famous work is called The Republic, and in it he talked about a perfectly governed society. Now, being that Plato is from just outside of Athens, what would you think he felt the perfectly governed society, what system would they be? You'd think so, right? He didn't think so. Because he thought most of us were pretty dumb. And he was like, if we let the people rule, like they're not terribly bright. And that's what got us into this issue. So he actually believed that a perfectly governed society was not a democracy. He thought there was three classes. That there was farmers and artisans. Do you remember what artisan is? Skilled worker. So the three classes are farmers and artisans, warriors, real warriors, and rulers. So farmers and artisans in one. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Farmers and artisans one, warriors, and rulers. That was a very effective way to do that. And he felt that they should be ruled by a philosopher king. Because philosophers were the only ones smart enough to do the actual ruling. Which is an amazing coincidence, because what was Plato? Philosopher. Rather self-serving prophecy here. Alright, now we're going to go super deep and super wonky here. We're going to talk about the allegory of the cave. You do not need to know for the test the allegory of the cave. But it's a really cool philosophical thought. Really cool philosophy thought. Good words, O'Neill. And so I'm just going to share with you because it's kind of cool. So there's this group. There's prisoners here. They've been there their whole life. So this is an allegory. This is a metaphor that Plato uses to describe how dumb we are, basically. Okay, they've been there their whole life. Their hands or feet are tied. They can't move. They can only look straight ahead. Behind them is a roadway, and behind that is a fire. And this roadway, people walk through all the time carrying different things, carrying baskets, animals, supplies, all kinds of stuff. And the fire casts a shadow on the wall here. So the only thing these prisoners can ever see their entire life are these shadows. It's the only thing they've ever seen. They've been here since birth in the allegory of the cave. So they don't know that these are real people carrying real things. They think the shadows are the reality. And what Plato is saying is they're not smart enough to understand that that's not reality. Because they're only relying on their senses. They're only relying on sight and sound, what they see and what they hear. But really, they're blinded to the light. They're blinded to what's going on. And the only way they could possibly understand reality is if they were able to go literally to the light, to go into the light. But the only way to do that is by being a philosopher, philosophical reasoning. And so he thought most of us were just, again, literally in the dark, not knowing what was going on, and thinking this little world was reality, when in truth, everything's going on behind the scenes. Again, you don't need to know the allegory of the cave. I just thought I'd share it with you because now you've heard it at least once. So right below the picture of the allegory of the cave is 3 lines from Plato. Go ahead and do the same thing. Put them in your own words and talk about what they mean. What are they going on? Go ahead.
Wait, Mr. O'Neill. What was the arrow from?
Oh, sorry. Let me fill in the ... for that. For the allegory of the cave. Only philosophers can see the truth. Everyone else is blind. So only philosophers can see the truth. Sorry, thank you, Max. Appreciate it. All right, sorry to interrupt your Plato conversation. Go ahead.
You can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the real tragedy of life is what matters. Like men are really happy.
Cora, Kai, talk about the Plato. Talk about the Plato quotes.
Once they lose their innocence, then
I've seen it before. You guys are laughing. How do you laugh at
Okay, let's talk about our last philosopher now. And this is Aristotle, is how you say his name. Aristotle is, I won't bias you anyway. So Aristotle believed the best way to get truth was knowledge. Best way to get truth was knowledge. And he actually summarized all of the knowledge of his time. He tried to collect everything. Not just philosophy, but science, math, history. So that was how he thought we were going to get truth, through knowledge, through knowing things. And so he's trying to collect all this information, all of the learning of his time. Science, math, history, philosophy, everything that he can. He and his works become the basis of Western thought for centuries. If you've heard of the Renaissance, he basically is the basis of Western thought all the way through the Renaissance, all the way through the 1500s. In the Islamic world, his works are read and they're so revered that he's not called Aristotle. He's simply referred to as the master. And so he is very, very influential. He also, just as a little foreshadowing, he was the tutor for Alexander the Great. So he had a fairly famous student too. So there are 3 Aristotle lines for you. Once again, put them in your own words and discuss them.
He studies how things originate.
it's like probably
No, it's like, you know, like how they work. Not consist of possessing on, but they're not described by how much material of capital.
I like that one too. I think that one.
Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all.
I always feel like the last one would sound real good if Sean Connery said it. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education. Oh, that would be good, David Attenborough. I mean, anything David Attenborough says is good, right? David Attenborough's got to be 197 years old. I mean, he was old when I was a kid. So, 2 more conversations we're going to have as we wrap up. which one of those three philosophies, either the quotes or the way they think you're going to find knowledge, which one of those three do you like the best? Talk with your partner. Which one of those three do you like the best and why? Lucas.
Aristotle.
Okay, now a more important question than just your valuable opinion. Which do you think would best bring about order back to Greece? Which one of those do you think would work best?
Yeah. Oh. We like sticks to yourself.
So, like I said, as I alluded to at the beginning, this is just scratching the surface of Greek philosophy. If this conversation interested you, there's all kinds of awesome books that you can get, like just simple philosophy books that explain it in very relatable, kind of everyday, live-in-the-world ways. And it's pretty interesting. I always have a hard time wrapping my brain around it, but I'm intrigued by it. I was hoping to give you some time to get started on your reading. I guess you only have about 10 minutes, but it's better than a sharp stick in the eye. You're essentially reading about Alexander the Great and then the Hellenistic world. It's 202 to 207, I'm pretty sure, on the pages. It's on the schedule. And notes, always, yes, thank you. Always notes. You'll never just read. There's no point to it. I think it's 202 to 207. Does anybody have their schedule handy? I mean, I guess I do. I can check. Yeah. 202 to 207. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Thank you. Good job.